I remember the exact moment my marriage died. Not the day I found the hotel receipts. Not the night I heard another woman's perfume clinging to his shirt. No, it died the second my husband looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You failed me as a wife. A real woman gives her husband children." And what hurt the most? He said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather, like I wasn't sitting there breaking into pieces. Before I tell you how everything turned out, let me ask you something. Have you ever been blamed for something you never chose? Punished for something completely outside your control? If you've ever felt that kind of injustice, then you'll understand exactly why I did what I did. My name is Sarah Johnson, and this is the story of how the man who destroyed me for being infertile ended up watching me walk away as a billionaire's wife. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent and absolute. When I married Daniel Carter, I thought I had one life. He wasn't rich back then, not even close. He was just a hard-working sales manager with big dreams and a charming smile that could melt anyone in seconds. I was the one with stability. A good job in corporate accounting, a small house inherited from my parents, savings carefully built over years of discipline. But I didn't mind. Because I loved him. Or at least I thought I did. The first 3 years of our marriage were peaceful, simple, warm, the kind of quiet happiness you don't question. We talked about kids often. He wanted 2, maybe 3. I wanted a house filled with laughter. We picked baby names for fun, painted a spare room soft yellow, just in case, bought tiny clothes once during a clearance sale because we couldn't resist. Back then, I thought we were building a future. I didn't know we were building a ticking bomb. The first sign something was wrong came during a routine medical checkup. The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and lemon wipes. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above me. I still remember how cold the examination table felt against my skin. The doctor didn't make eye contact when she said it. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but conceiving naturally will be extremely difficult." Her words felt unreal, like they were meant for someone else. I sat there numb, staring at a motivational poster on the wall that said, "Miracles happen every day." I wanted to laugh, because in that moment, it felt like miracles had just permanently left my life. Telling Daniel was the hardest thing I had ever done. He sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone when I walked in. I saw the doctor today," I whispered. He looked up casually. "Everything okay?" My throat tightened. They said I might not be able to have children. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. At first he didn't react. Then slowly his expression changed. Not sadness, not concern, disappointment. That was the first crack in our marriage. And I didn't even realize it yet. Over the next few months, everything shifted. Subtly at first. Daniel stopped talking about the future. Stopped touching me the same way. Stopped laughing with me at night. Instead, he became distant. Cold. And worst of all, resentful. Every time he saw a father with a child in public, I could feel his gaze drifting toward me afterward. Like I was responsible. Like I had betrayed him. Then came the night everything shattered. It was raining heavily outside, the kind of rain that hits windows like angry fingers. I had just finished cooking dinner. He walked in late, smelling of cologne that wasn't his. I asked gently, "Where were you?" And he snapped, "I was out living a normal life, Sarah, something I can't do with you." My heart dropped. "What does that mean?" He laughed bitterly. "It means I married someone who can't even give me a family." Those words cut deeper than anything I had ever heard. "I didn't choose this," I whispered. But he leaned closer and said something that still echoes in my nightmares. "Maybe I chose wrong." That was the night he told me he had been seeing someone else. For months. A woman from his office. Young, fertile, full of life as he described her. He didn't even look guilty. He looked justified. Like he believed he deserved it. Like I deserved the pain. I remember standing there, unable to breathe. My chest felt tight. My hands trembled. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was what he said next. "I'm not leaving you yet," he told me coldly. "You still pay most of the bills." That was the moment something inside me changed forever. Because I realized I had never been his partner. I had been his safety net. And now I was disposable. But what Daniel didn't know was that the woman he thought he had broken was about to become someone he would never be able to touch again. And it all started with a phone call that came 3 weeks later. A phone call that would change everything. Forever. The phone call came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer it. I was sitting at my office desk, staring blankly at spreadsheets that blurred into meaningless numbers. My eyes were swollen from crying the night before. My head pounded from another sleepless night. Daniel hadn't come home again. When my phone buzzed, the unknown number made my stomach tighten. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something inside me told me to pick up. "Hello? Is this Sarah Johnson?" a calm male voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is attorney Mark Ellison from Ellison and Brooks law firm. I'm calling regarding the estate of Mr. Robert Johnson." My breath caught. Robert Johnson. My father. He had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden stroke. We hadn't been close in his later years. After my parents divorced, he moved across the country, and contact between us had been complicated. Still, hearing his name felt like someone had pressed on an old bruise. I don't understand," I said quietly. "There have been updates to his financial holdings that require your immediate attention," the lawyer continued. "You are listed as the sole beneficiary." Sole beneficiary? That didn't make sense. My father was never wealthy. He had struggled financially for most of his life. "What exactly are we talking about?" I asked, my voice barely steady. There was a pause. Then he said something that made my heart stop. "Your father left you controlling shares in a private investment group, currently valued at approximately $312 million. For a moment I thought I had misheard. The world seemed to tilt. "300 million, I whispered. "Yes, Ms. Johnson." My hands started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. It didn't feel real. It felt like some cruel mistake. But it was. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. $300 million. It wasn't just money. It was power, freedom, security. And the strange part, my first emotion wasn't happiness. It was grief. Because the man who had given me this unexpected lifeline was gone. I would never get the chance to thank him. That night Daniel came home unusually early. He was in a good mood, smiling even, which immediately made me suspicious. He sat across from me at the dinner table and cleared his throat. "We need to talk." My stomach twisted. "What about?" He leaned back casually. "Lena is pregnant." The words hit like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. He said it proudly, like it was an achievement, like he expected me to congratulate him. "I'm going to be a father," he added. Then he looked at me almost smugly. "This is why I had no choice." No choice. As if cheating was something forced upon him. As if my infertility had pushed him into someone else's bed. My hands clenched under the table. For a moment I thought I might scream. But instead, something strange happened. I felt calm, colder than I had ever felt in my life. Because in that moment, I realized something important. He thought he had already won. He believed I was weak, dependent, broken. He had no idea that I no longer needed him at all. I didn't tell him about the inheritance. Not a word. And that decision became the first step in everything that followed. Over the next few weeks, I played the role perfectly. The quiet, defeated wife. The woman who had nowhere else to go. I cooked his meals, paid the bills, listened silently when he talked about Lena's pregnancy. Every word he spoke fueled something growing inside me. Not rage, not hatred, something sharper, purpose. Meanwhile, I met with the lawyers in secret. That was when I learned the full truth about my father. He hadn't been poor at all. He had invested quietly for decades, built wealth slowly, carefully, privately, and for reasons I would never fully understand. He left everything to me. The first time I saw the balance sheet, my chest tightened. Hundreds of millions. Assets, stocks, real estate, investment control. I sat there in stunned silence. For years I had been treated like I was powerless, disposable, worthless, and now I held enough financial power to change entire lives, including Daniel. But here's the thing. I didn't want loud revenge. I didn't want screaming fights or dramatic confrontations. No, I wanted something far more devastating. I wanted him to feel exactly what he had made me feel. Small, unimportant, replaceable. That was when I met Adrian Blake. The first time I saw him was during a board meeting at the investment firm. He walked in confidently, wearing a simple navy suit, but everyone in the room immediately straightened. Not because he demanded attention, but because his presence commanded it naturally. Later I learned why. Adrian Blake wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Self-made, brilliant, respected, and completely uninterested in shallow people. Our first conversation was brief, professional, but I noticed something immediately. He listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't talk down to me, didn't treat me like I was fragile or weak. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Over the next months we worked together frequently. He began trusting my financial instincts, valuing my input, encouraging my confidence. Slowly, something inside me started healing. Not because of romance, but because of respect. Something Daniel had never truly given me. One evening after a late meeting, Adrian asked gently, "Can I ask you something personal?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Why do you always look like you're waiting for someone to hurt you?" The question hit deeper than any accusation ever had. I couldn't answer, because I realized it was true. That night I went home and watched Daniel asleep on the couch, snoring, careless, unaffected by the pain he had caused. And for the first time, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt something else. Clarity. Because I finally understood one thing. I didn't just want to escape him. I wanted him to one day realize exactly what he had thrown away. And that opportunity came sooner than I expected. Because 3 months later, Daniel walked into the living room one evening, holding divorce papers, and smiling. But what he didn't know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his entire life. When Daniel handed me the divorce papers, he looked relieved. Not sad, not conflicted, relieved, like he had finally escaped a burden. I remember the way he leaned casually against the wall, arms folded, watching me as if he expected me to cry, beg, or break down. Instead, I simply took the papers. My hands were steady, my voice calm. "You're sure this is what you want?" I asked. He smirked. "Sarah, you know this marriage has been over for a long time." Then he added the words that sealed his fate. "I deserve a real family." I nodded slowly. Inside, something cold and sharp settled permanently in my chest. "All right," I said quietly, "I'll sign." He looked surprised. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't fight. He expected drama, tears, desperation. Instead, I gave him peace. And nothing unsettles someone more than peace when they're expecting chaos. The next weeks were surreal. Daniel moved in with Lena almost immediately. He didn't even try to hide it. In fact, he flaunted it, posting photos online of their new apartment, her baby bump, their smiling faces. Comments flooded in. "Congratulations. You two look perfect together. So happy for you." Each notification felt like tiny needles pressing into my skin. But I didn't react. Because I knew something they didn't. They were celebrating a fantasy. And fantasies always collapse. The divorce settlement process revealed something interesting. Daniel had assumed he would walk away comfortably. After all, for years, I had paid most of the mortgage, utilities, and expenses. But the house legally remained in my name. So did most of the savings. And once the financial disclosures were complete, the reality hit him. He was leaving with far less than he expected. The first time he realized this was during a mediation meeting. I still remember the expression on his face when the lawyer explained it. "You signed a prenup, Mr. Carter. The majority of the assets belong to Ms. Johnson." His jaw tightened. He turned toward me, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "You never told me you had this much saved." I met his gaze calmly. "You never asked." That was the first time I saw a flicker of unease in him. Just a flicker. But it was the beginning. Meanwhile, my life outside the divorce was transforming. I was stepping deeper into the investment world, attending high-level meetings, making decisions involving millions. And Adrian Blake remained a constant presence. Supportive, observant, never intrusive. One evening after a particularly long strategy session, he invited me for coffee. We sat in a quiet corner of a rooftop cafe overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, carrying the distant hum of traffic. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said softly, "You're stronger than you think, Sarah." I laughed bitterly. "You don't know everything." He studied me calmly. "I don't need to. Strength isn't about never being hurt, it's about what you do afterward." His words lingered long after that night. Because for the first time, I realized something important. I wasn't planning revenge out of bitterness anymore. I was planning it out of self-respect. The true turning point came during the final court hearing. Daniel arrived late, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit well. He looked tired, stressed, different. Lena wasn't with him. And when the judge finalized the divorce, he avoided looking at me. Until the moment we stepped outside. That's when he finally spoke. "Sarah, wait." I turned slowly. His voice had changed. The arrogance was gone. In its place, uncertainty. "I didn't know things would be this hard," he admitted quietly. His business had started struggling. Lena had stopped working due to pregnancy complications. Medical bills were piling up. And suddenly, reality was hitting him. Hard. Then he said something that almost made me laugh. "You always handled everything better than me." Of course I did. Because I had carried him for years. Emotionally, financially, mentally. And now he was realizing what it meant to stand alone. He hesitated before speaking again. Maybe we could still be friends. Friends. The word sounded absurd. But instead of reacting emotionally, I smiled politely. We're strangers now, Daniel, that's enough. And I walked away. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because what Daniel still didn't know was that his entire career depended on something he had never bothered to understand. The investment firm he worked with, the company managing his employer's largest accounts, the firm that controlled the funding, keeping his workplace alive, was now under my authority. The day I signed the final approval papers granting me majority decision power, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't about destroying him. It was about balance, about justice, about letting him experience the consequences of his choices. And then came the final piece of the puzzle. 6 months after my divorce, Adrian Blake asked me to dinner, not as a business partner, but as something more. His voice was steady when he said, "I admire you, your resilience, your intelligence, your integrity. I'd like to know you outside of work." There was no pressure, no manipulation, no hidden motives, just respect. And for the first time in years, I said yes. Our relationship grew slowly, naturally, built on trust, not dependency, not need, but genuine partnership. And exactly 1 year after Daniel had left me for another woman, Adrian proposed. Quietly, privately, with sincerity in his eyes. And when I said yes, I knew something with absolute certainty. My revenge wasn't about hurting Daniel anymore. It was about showing him. He had never truly understood my worth. But he was about to. Because 3 months later, he would walk into a corporate meeting room and see me sitting at the head of the table, as the woman who controlled his future. The morning Daniel walked into that boardroom, I remember feeling nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a calm, steady stillness. The kind that comes when you've finally healed. The conference room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Large windows stretched from floor to ceiling, sunlight pouring across the polished table. At the head of that table, I sat. A navy blazer fitted perfectly over my shoulders, my hair tied neatly, my posture straight. Confident, composed, unrecognizable from the woman Daniel once called not enough. Executives were already seated when he entered. I heard the door open. Footsteps, then silence. A long, stunned silence. I didn't need to look up immediately. I could feel it. The shock radiating from him. When I finally lifted my gaze, our eyes met. And in that single moment, I saw everything. Confusion, disbelief, fear. His face had changed. He looked thinner, tired. Life had clearly been much harder without someone quietly holding everything together for him. "Sarah," he whispered. His voice cracked. But before he could say more, the CEO beside him cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, please take a seat. The meeting is about to begin." Daniel slowly sat down. But he couldn't stop staring at me, like he was trying to understand how the woman he once dismissed was now sitting above him in authority. The presentation began. Charts, financial projections, performance reports. But Daniel wasn't listening. I could see it in his rigid posture, his clenched jaw, the way his eyes kept drifting toward me. Waiting. Desperate. Finally, the CEO spoke the words that shattered him completely. "As you know, our company's continued funding depends on our investment partner. He gestured toward me. Ms. Sarah Johnson, majority stakeholder and controlling authority of Johnson Holdings. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of Daniel's breathing. Sharp, uneven. In that moment, his world collapsed, because he understood everything at once. The divorce, my calmness, my silence, my independence. It wasn't weakness. It was power he had never bothered to see. After the meeting ended, he approached me immediately. His steps hesitant, uncertain. Sarah, I didn't know, he said quietly. I met his eyes calmly. You never wanted to know. He swallowed hard. Regret filled his expression. I made a mistake. Yes, he did. But not just the affair. His mistake was underestimating me. Then he said the words I had once begged to hear. I was wrong about you. For a moment, memories flashed through my mind. Nights of crying silently in the bathroom. The sting of his cruel words. The feeling of being worthless. Invisible. Disposable. But when I looked at him now, I didn't feel pain. I felt closure. I know, I said softly. And that was all. No insults. No cruelty. No dramatic speeches. Because true justice doesn't need noise. It speaks through reality itself. Over the following months, Daniel's life continued to spiral. His company downsized. He lost his position. Financial stress consumed his relationship with Lena. They argued constantly. And eventually, she left, taking their child with her. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances. But by then, it didn't matter, because my life had moved far beyond him. A year later, I stood on a balcony overlooking the ocean, wearing a wedding dress. The wind gently lifted the fabric. The sun glowed warm against my skin. And beside me stood Adrian Blake, my husband, my equals, a man who saw my strength instead of my perceived flaws. During the ceremony, he whispered something that brought tears to my eyes. You were never broken, Sarah. You were simply surrounded by people who couldn't see your value. And for the first time in years, I believed it completely. Months later, life gave me something unexpected. Not through biology, but through love. We adopted a little girl from a local children's home. The first time she called me Mom, my heart felt fuller than I ever thought possible. Because motherhood isn't defined by the body. It's defined by the heart. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's living a life so full, so peaceful, so powerful, that they become irrelevant. Years later, I saw Daniel once more. By chance, at a grocery store. He looked older, tired, defeated. When our eyes met, he hesitated, then gave a small nod. I returned it politely. Nothing more. Because he was no longer part of my story. Just a lesson. And that was when I truly understood something. He didn't lose me because I couldn't give him children. He lost me because he couldn't recognize my worth. And by the time he realized it, I had already become someone he could never reach again. If there's one thing I learned from everything that happened, it's this. Never let someone else define your value. People will project their fears, their insecurities, and their limitations onto you. But their perception is not your reality. Sometimes life breaks you first, only to rebuild you stronger than you ever imagined. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or made to feel like you weren't enough, remember this. Your worth doesn't come from what you can give others. It comes from who you are. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rising so high that the people who hurt you can only watch from below. If you believe in justice, growth, and stories of powerful comebacks, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because your story might be the next one that inspires someone else to rise. And trust me, the strongest victories are always the quiet ones.